Hello pinball makers, my name is Anthony Van Winkle, and welcome to part 2 of setting up MPF 0.80 and GMC. In the first video we covered installations, prerequisites, virtual environments, and MPF initialization, so if you haven't done that yet, please check out that video and then come back. In this one we're going to talk about Godot, setting up a new project, hooking up GMC, and getting MPF and GMC to talk to each other to show a slide on attract mode. We're going to jump right in, so let's go. Now we already downloaded Godot, and so it's a standalone application, so all we need to do is go to the Finder where we put it in our home folder and open Godot. So Godot opens to the project manager. Every Godot game is called a project, and we're going to create a new project that is going to be the media side of our game. So when we run our game, we're going to have two applications running. MPF is going to be running the game logic, Godot is going to be running the media, and they communicate with each other to give updates about what's going on. So we're going to select Create New Project. And we'll put in our name, Happy Pinball. And we're going to choose a project path. Now for this, we're going to choose our the same folder that we put our MPF initialization in. So the Happy Pinball folder in our Documents folder, we can see all the files that MPF created here. This is where we want the game to be installed. Some people may put the Godot and the MPF files in separate folders or subfolders, but that gets more complicated. So for this project, we're just going to have all the Godot and MPF stuff in the same place. So we're going to select current folder. By default, Godot is going to try to create a subfolder, which we don't want. So uncheck this create folder. And we're going to do the selected path is not empty because our MPF files are there. That's fine. For the renderer, forward plus is good if you have a lot of 3D graphics. If you're going to put a beefy 3D card in there and have like 3D effects, particle physics, lighting, all that dynamic stuff like a modern game, forward plus would be good for you. Most people, mobile's going to be fine. It'll get you lighting effects, it'll get you rendering, all sorts of transitions and animations and movies and all that stuff, but a little less overhead for the type of machine that's most likely going to be in your final pinball. So mobile is what we want. That's the path to our MPF folder, so we'll hit Create and Edit. It gives us a warning that this is a non-empty folder, but that's okay. So now Godot has loaded up, and we're here. It by default to the 3D space, which doesn't really help us. We're going to be working in the 2D space primarily. But first, we need to install GMC. GMC is available as a Godot plugin. So at the top here, you go to the Asset Library tab and search Assets. The Asset Library requires an online connection, so we're going to go online. And we're going to search for assets. We're going to type in GMC, and there's the Godot Media Controller for MPF. Click on that. You can say it's version 0.1.1 at the time of recording. That may be higher, but that's okay. So we'll hit download, and it'll download it. And there's it says there's a conflict here, and that's because the asset bundle that we download for GMC includes things like git ignore files, a readme file, and all that stuff. And we don't need to have all of that. So if we show the conflict, and let's deselect everything and only select this add-ons folder, the MPF GMC add-ons folder. That's what we want. So we hit install. And this is going to copy all of the GMC files into our project. Now, of course, it's going to give a bunch of errors. This is something they're going to work on in a future version of Godot to give a bunch of errors. But right now, during the initial setup, there will be a bunch of errors. Don't worry about it. So now we've downloaded all the files that GMC needs and put them in our project folder. But we need to enable it as a plugin and then make the MPF GMC code connections available for other scripts to use. So we go to the project settings. And under Plugins, you'll see the Godot MC. We need to click that to be enabled. If you get a warning down there, don't worry about it. Next, we'll go to Globals, and this is what we need to do to expose the GMC to all of the rest of Godot, so custom scripts, MPF, all those other things can see it. So what we need to do here is we need to select the path to the main GMC file. So click on the folder icon, go to Add-ons, MPF GMC, and select mpfgmc.gd. That's mpfgmc.gd. Not the editor, just that one. So we open that one up, and under node name, this is very important, so pay attention. Under node name, we need to get rid of the default and put MPF in all caps. It is case sensitive, so it has to be MPF exactly, all caps, hit add. Now, wherever we are in Godot, when we reference MPF, it will reference the GMC script and expose everything that we need. So we can close that. The next thing we want to do is set up our audio system. So if you're down at the bottom, we have the audio tab, and by default, there's just the master bus. We're going to want to add a few more buses for sound effects, voice, and music. Again, if you want to change it, if you want to do something on with your game, that's fine, but for most people, this is what we'll need. So we go add bus, and we're going to name this one music. Make it all lowercase because this is case sensitive. The next one we'll do will be voice, and the final one will be effects. It doesn't matter how many you have or what you name them. We're going to configure this separately in a GMC configuration file so MPF knows how to interact with them, but this is pretty good template for anybody who's going to need this. So now we can save the scene to save the project, and we are good to go. So now that GMC is installed and ready to run, it's a good time to do a commit. So let's quit Godot, open up source tree, so we can go to file status and see all the different files that are going to be added. Now these are just the files that are the GMC. We want to commit these to the repo because this is part of the game, and we won't be able to run our game without these files. So we're just going to stage all. The commit message will put Godot project and GMC, and we'll push them to main and commit. So now with this commit, we have a snapshot of what our game looks like with MPF installed, the MPF configs initialized, and the Godot project set up with GMC. So this is basically a blank slate at this point, and if you want to make a copy of it or revert back to it, this is the starting point. One piece of housekeeping to introduce right now is the concept of Git LFS, which stands for Large File System. So when Git makes commits and it keeps track of your history, it tracks all of the changes within your files line by line, so you can revert little pieces or see exactly what changed from piece to piece. This works great for text files, but not so good for binary files like videos, sounds, and pictures. So one thing that we can do with Git is tell it that certain types of files are not meant to be read and interpreted line by line, but meant to be just entire files, and that's called Git LFS. Fortunately, it's easy to set up Git LFS through source tree. So we will open up source tree, which goes into our repository. And from the source tree window, we're going to click on terminal. Now this is slightly different than PowerShell because PowerShell doesn't necessarily know what Git is or where Git is, but this terminal definitely does. We can type git status to see where we are, and it will show that we're on the main branch, everything's clean. So now we type git LFS install. And this will initialize that our repository is a Git LFS repository, and it now knows to look for certain files to commit them as binary files instead of text files. How does it know which files? Well, we'll tell it. So we'll type git LFS track quote star.wav for end quote. So this means that any file that ends in wave, any sound file, is going to be tracked as an LFS file and not as a binary file. So we push enter, and that tracks wave. Now under the hood, this secretly created a new file called git attributes, which is where all of this is going to be tracked. So we could go one by one through Git LFS track and add all the different file types that we like, but it'd be a little bit faster if we open up Visual Studio Code. So here in VS Code, we can see our folder, and we can see that Git attributes file, and you can see that it added .wave filters LFS. So this means that anything that matches this wave pattern is going to be LFS. So we can copy that line, and we can paste it, and we can change that to something like MP3. And we can do one for something like a JPG for our images. And we could go through, line by line and think of all the different things. But fortunately, there's a lot of consistency here. So the MPF sample project does have a Git attributes file with most things that would be used for Git LFS. I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video, so you can just download that and drop it in as your Git attributes file if you don't want to go through this line by line. But with this change now, when we add images, videos, photos, all that stuff to our repository. It's not going to try to keep track of all that size, which can really make the Git history very large and complicated. And instead, it's going to store it in a nice, clean binary. So that's the housekeeping for Git LFS, and we're all done, and we can close that out. One last piece of housekeeping before we can actually make our game is to set up the configuration file for Godot. Now this is because the Godot project runs in its own sort of environment, but doesn't necessarily know how to communicate to MPF some of its preferences. So we're going to define a configuration file for Godot with the GMC specific things that it needs to know. In order to do that, we'll open up Visual Studio Code, and we're going to make a new file, and we're going to save this file as gmc.cfg. It's just a text file right in the root where you've got all of your other basic configurations. And in this GMC configuration, the first thing, the only thing that we need to set up specifically is the sound system. You remember that we set the audio buses in Godot, but unfortunately the audio bus interface in Godot is abstracted and we can't access it through code. So we have to define here how we want those audio buses to behave. So we're going to type bracket sound system, sound underscore system on a new line. And we're going to define what those buses are. Now these names will be the same names as we named the buses in the Godot editor. So we'll say music equals open bracket quote type colon quote solo. That's because music, we only want one music track to be playing at a time. And if we play a new one, we want the old one to stop. The next one is going to be effects, open bracket, and we'll do quote type simultaneous. And this is because effects, we want all the effects to play whenever we send them in. Doesn't matter how many, if somebody's already playing, we always want those effects to play on top of each other. So we'll say simultaneous sounds. This can be up to your preference. You don't want to have too many sounds going at once, but I think 3 is a good place to start. The 3 does not go in quotes, make note of that. And finally, we're going to put default true. Now this true also does not go in quotes, so it should show up as a slightly different color. And that means if we send a sound to GMC, if we use the sound player in MPF to send a sound and we don't specify which bus we want it to play on effects. And this is just convenient because in all of the audio files you have for your game, most of them are going to be effects, so it makes sense that effects is the default. If you want to use voice or something else, you can do that. And then finally, we'll have voice. And voice is going to be of type sequential. And this means that if we have a voice track already playing and we send another one, don't play them on top of each other like effects, but don't cancel the old one like music. It means hold on to the new one, wait for the first one to finish, and then play the second one. So it will stack them up in a queue and play them sequentially. That's a pretty good default behavior for voice. And again, all of this you can adjust later. So we will save that file as gmc.configuration, and now we're good to go. Let's make a game. Because we used MPF init, we already have the basic configuration and attract mode files that will set up, launch an attract mode, and try to play a slide. So really, the only thing we need to do to get this game up and running is make an attract slide. In order to do that, we will open up Godot. So from our wherever we put it, we'll open up the Godot editor. We will open our Happy Pinball project. And it's time to make our first slide. So we'll switch over to the 2D editor, and we will switch over to output, and there's 2 places you can put a slide. You can have a common slides folder where any slides live, or if it's a mode-specific slide, you can put it in the modes folder. I find it more convenient to have all the slides in one place, so we're going to make a new folder called slides, and we're going to put it there. Now this is important because GMC is only going to look specifically in a mode slides folder or the root slides folder. So we'll open up the slides folder and we'll right click and create new scene. This is the dialog, and this is where a lot of people get confused the first time through. So you can do a 2D scene, a 3D scene, a UI scene, or something custom. We want to do something custom. Any slides we make in GMC need to be based on the MPF slide class. So we're going to type node here, And from the drop-down, we're getting a list of all the nodes that are available. If you just type MPF, it'll filter down, and you can see the MPF classes that GMC has added to Godot. And we're going to choose MPF slide. The scene name is going to be attract. Now this is the name of the slide. Scenes, slides, same thing. So when we use the slide player in MPF and we say what the name of the slide is, we're going to call it attract. So attract.scene, hit OK. And now we are in the attract scene. It gives it the name attract by default, and there's not really much to see here because we haven't set up what we want our game to look like. Real quick, we can go to our project settings, and under the window here, we've got this height and width. Let's go for a nice 1280, numlock, nice 1280 by 1024. And you can see that blue box there, that sets what we want our window to look like. So 1280, 1024 is good. And we're going to do something real simple here just to show how it works. Let's make a background color. So in the scene tree, up in this little plus icon here, we're going to add a child node. And the child node is going to be a color rectangle. So if you just type color, we can see color rect is the suggested one. So we're going to pick that there. And you can see we've got these little handles here to drag it. So we're going to drag it down to be the full size of this box that we have, that is our screen. And that looks pretty good, but if we want to be certain, we can go to the layout here and the transform and see the size, and we can just set it to a nice 1280 by 1024 to make sure it's exactly where we want it to be and the size we want it to be. And the color, I'm feeling a little bit blue today, so let's make it a nice, that seems like a nice blue. Let's do that. Okay, so there's our blue slide, and we'll put a little bit of text on it just to show that we're doing something here. So back up here, we're going to create another child node, and in Godot, text is called label. So we'll search for label. I'll put a label in there. And that label node is created up there, but there's nothing in it. So let's type in some text. Welcome to Happy Pinball. And you can see it starts to show up there. But that's not super great, so let's have some fun with it. Let's expand it to be the full width of the slide. I'm not going to go into the layout and make sure it's exactly right. We're just going to eyeball this one. We're going to set the horizontal alignment to center. That looks good. Vertical alignment to center, so it's nice and middle there. And let's scroll down to some of these theme overrides with the fonts and the font size. Let's set the font size to something nice and juicy like 120. Oop, that's too big. Okay, how about font size 80? Perfect. So it's centered, it looks there. Welcome to Happy Pinball. Let's save. One more thing we'll do before we run the game is add some music to the attract mode. This is just to show how the sound player works and how to get assets up and running in Godot. So to start, we will need some music. Any file will do. I've got some nice music folder right here and an intro music.mp3. You can make your music files and your sound files whatever you want, except no spaces in the names. And it's recommended to do everything lowercase because some systems are case sensitive, and if you mix uppercase and lowercase, it can get a little bit wonky. So we'll just copy this music file right here and go to our project folder. And we're going to make a new folder called Sounds. So new folder, we'll call it Sounds. And inside the Sounds folder, we'll make subfolders for each of our different buses. This makes it organized and it helps GMC to find what we're looking for. So this one is called Music. And since we're here, might as well make the others. We'll make a new folder called Voice and a new folder called Effects. And we'll go into the music folder and we'll add our music file, intro music. Now when we go back into Godot, you'll see a little thing pop up real quick that says re-importing assets. Now this is Godot looking at there was a new media file added and it needs to do some understanding of the metadata so it can play it properly. This is something that you'll need to do anytime you add new files. You'll need to open up the Godot editor just so it can import them all, but it'll do it automatically. Now we need to tell MPF to play that file. So we will go to Visual Studio Code, and it'll open back up into our project folder. And if we go into Modes, Attract YAML, This is the base code for attract mode. Now this file here is what was set up by MPF and init. That's why there's the slide player here. So when the slide plays, it's not magic, it's the MPF and init kicking off. And we're going to, in addition to the slide player, we're going to add a new section called sound player, sound_player, and indent. And when the attract mode starts, we want to play the music. So we'll use the same event, mode attract started. And because this is going to have multiple options, we need to do it on a new line. So we'll do a new line, we'll indent again, and we'll say the name of the file, which was, what do we call it? Intro_music. Now we don't need the extension there, that will automatically be filled in. This is just intro_music. Intro_music. And then because our default bus is effects, and this is going to be playing on music, we need to specify that. So new line, indent, bus, music, and save that file. Now, before we run it, there's one more thing we need to do, and that has to do with how GMC is structured. So at the highest level, GMC has what's called a window, which is the main game window that everything runs inside. Inside the window, you will have one or more displays, and each display will hold the slides. Each slide can hold widgets or not. So at the top level, we have a window, and that's going to be the main scene. So we need to tell Godot, when you open up the program, that's what we start with. So back in Godot, we go to Project Settings, and under Application Run, they'll see Main Scene. We haven't defined a main scene yet. Now the main scene needs to initialize the displays. It also needs to open up the connection to MPF, listen for events, and start initializing everything. So GMC comes with a file to do that. So we'll click on the icon here and go to the Add-ons, MPF+GMC, Slides, and we will pick Window. Window being the main scene that will initialize the displays and open up the connections. So we open up the window scene and close. Now is a good time to save. And that's pretty much everything that we need to do to get GMC up and running, connect to MPF, play a slide, and play some music. So that's a good time to make a commit. We will open up SourceTree. And here in SourceTree, we can see our tracked scene our intro music, the import file for it, the attract mode itself. We can see we added the sound player, and we also have the Git attributes file. If you didn't copy and paste the Git attributes file, do that now, because this MP3 file, we're going to want to use LFS. But this is all good, so we will stage all. We'll type in our commit message of attract mode slide and music, and we will push it. All right, and the push is done. And just to double check, we can go back to GitHub and refresh, and we'll see our Git attributes file, we'll see our music folder. And one other thing we can do is if we click on the sounds music and go to this intromusic.mp3, we can see at the top stored with Git LFS. That means that it is correctly tracking it as a binary file and not trying to maintain all the changes in between, which is very important for, having free GitHub and not running out of space. So that's good to see. We've got everything up. Let's run the game. So now we're ready to run the game, and that's going to involve initializing Godot and running the project there and running MPF. So from the Godot editor in the upper right corner, there's this play icon which will run the project, which means opening up the window and starting the main scene that we defined. So we click on play, and you see the Godot window will pop up at 1280 by 1024, which is what we specified in project settings. And we've got a Defender firewall. Let's allow access on all networks. And now we get the screen that says waiting for MPF. So this is that main window opening the connection, but it's going to wait for MPF to tell it what to do before it goes any further. So we will open up our PowerShell. Now here I've restarted the computer, so I am not in the virtual environment. We will need to activate that as well. So we will type the path to an environment, scripts, activate.ps1. And we see the MPF there in parentheses, meaning we are now in the virtual environment. So we can go back to our folder. And here we will run MPF. So we just type MPF-XT. We're not going to use the B like we did before because we actually want to connect. So we push enter, and MPF will connect. And attract slide is running, and we can see in the log here, slide attract creative, slide attract active. And in fact, if we go over to Godot, there's our attract slide. You can't hear it, but the music is playing. And that's all there is to it. We've got a slide running, we've got connection between GMC and MPF, and we're ready to start building out more advanced stuff. We can go back and Control-C to exit the game, which will automatically close Godot. In the next video, I'll be covering some more advanced techniques like a carousel slide to cycle through different items, and a base mode slide with a score and some other player variables. So stay tuned for that.